Everybody, I got good news and bad news. The good news is, this is a theory video. The bad news, it's not Has-Been Hotel related, but I'm excited to do this video regardless. Hello everyone, my name is BlueRaven666, and today I wanted to talk about a game that seems to be gradually taking the internet by storm. Cooking Companions. I know, BlueRaven666 is talking about another dating sim. Shocker, right? If you've never heard of this game, Cooking Companions is a visual novel-style game that has you set in a remote cabin with 4 other characters: Mariah, Anatoly, Gregory, and Karin. At first, things seem relatively tame and unassuming, with us exploring the cabin as we get to know the other characters. That is, until day 2 of our stay, when a nasty storm rolls in, leaving us stranded, and shit very quickly starts to hit the fan. I originally heard about this game over on the Game Theorist channel, and he dives deep into the various myths and lore hidden within the game. After watching a few other creators play through the game, simply because I enjoy the overall story, the characters, the constantly expanding mystery of who we are and what's going on, and the disturbing visuals that we get along the way, I had to play it for myself. And there was one question that kept bugging me the entire time. Of all the characters in the game, why do we get saddled with Karin? And this is unavoidable. Even if you avoid Karin and choose to max out your bond with Mariah, Anatoly, or Gregory in the game, in the end you wind up left alone with who, in my own opinion, should have been the first person voted off of the island. And by that, I mean thrown out into the storm to eventually die and get served up as mystery meat. If you're familiar with me and my particular taste in characters, then you probably already know that I made a beeline for Anatoly right out of the gate. But even after maxing out our bond with him, he still eventually leaves the cabin, and we're unable to stop Mariah from leaving, and we're unable to save Gregory from Karin's clutches when the food situation gets out of control. In the end, no matter if you're on good or bad terms with her, you're left alone with Karin. Personally, I hate it when dating sims do things like this. It's one of my biggest gripes with Obey Me, another dating sim that I've talked about on this channel. In these games, you make choices during scenes with certain characters, but no matter which option you go with, the outcome is always the same. It happens a lot in Obey Me, and it also happens a lot in Cooking Companions. Sure, this game has multiple endings, including a happy ending with Karin as a lifelong cooking companion, where we're basically this unstoppable power couple, but the same can't be said for the others. Why? Why aren't we offered a similar happy ending with Mariah, Anatoly, or Gregory? Well, as it turns out, there might be a good reason in the grand scheme of it all. You see, it's very important that I mention that our own character in the game isn't exactly a saint. There are plenty of points where we manipulate the other characters or twist things to work in our favor. For the most part, our character spends a fair portion of the game cooking, eating, or sleeping. Just as well, during one of the scenes when Mariah starts hyperventilating from laughing at Gregory, we don't do anything, basically implying that if she dies laughing, it'd be one less mouth to feed. Plus, we're a cannibal, if that wasn't made clear already. Not to mention, you know those cute little food items that appear all over this game? Yeah, those are also characters called the Chompettes. One of these Chompettes, Raspberry, has no problem calling us a scourge on all of mankind, and honestly, I think that's a fair statement. Basically, what we're looking at here is a potential match made in hell. Let's think about our 3 other cabin mates before we get to Karin. The first person to leave the cabin and ultimately become our next meal is Mariah. When it comes to anime girls, Mariah really is best girl. She's sweet, adorable, and does her best to help everyone else out the best that she can. Out of everyone that I've seen play the game, Mariah seems to be a personal favorite for perfectly valid reasons. So, why was she the first one to go? Well, aside from the fact that she literally drew the short stick when it was time to decide who was going to go out during the storm to search for food or help, having Mariah as a cooking companion would be a little impractical. We find out pretty early on in the game that Mariah really isn't into eating meat. Our first few days in the cabin, we restrict the group to eating solely vegetarian meals to accommodate, and Mariah herself eventually tells us that she normally has to pick the meat out of her meals before she starts eating. In a scenario where all there's left to eat is human flesh, restricting your options for food, it kind of makes it harder for everyone else involved. And this isn't just me trying to rag on food intolerances here. I understand that for people with those intolerances or food allergies, eating those foods could be just as bad as starving to death. Either you spend the rest of your time on the toilet losing copious amounts of fluids that you should be retaining in the process, or you suffer from a negative reaction that could result in your death. It's a lose-lose-lose situation. But Mariah seems to be a vegetarian by choice, opting to admire the animals in their natural habitat rather than looking at them as a source of food. You know what's bad when the sweet, innocent character in the game sees a red deer, and my own reaction outside of the game is, and what, you didn't kill it? That's dinner! So yeah, the way I see it, vegetarian plus cannibal equals not so happy fun times for either party. Would Mariah have changed her tune if there was literally nothing else? Literally nothing else but meat. I mean, maybe, but I think she'd be miserable the entire time and eternally loathe us regardless. So what about Anatoly? My chatty, nerdy, illiterate boy. He ate the meat. Why'd we have to do him dirty? Why didn't we prevent him from leaving the cabin? While Anatoly does eat the meat we managed to obtain, it's clear that he feels very conflicted doing so. At first, he struggles to keep the cuts he eats down, and when we check in on him in the bathroom, he asks us not to tell him where the meat came from. Then, of course, we have our first really unnerving scene in the living room of the cabin where Anatoly is basically begging for more meat. While the hunger affects everyone in the scene, Anatoly clearly gets the worst of it, confessing later in the dining area that he didn't know what came over him. On the Game Theorists channel, MatPat came to the conclusion that our character was possessed by the Baba Yaga, a character from Slavic folklore whose modern interpretations describe as a cannibalistic witch. My own impression is that not only are we possessed by the spirit of Baba Yaga, it also tends to spread like a curse, because as we see in Cooking Companions, Anatoly, Gregory, and Karin all experience sudden outbursts, if only momentarily, in the living room after consuming the meat. It only happens once with Gregory, progressively gets more intense with Karin, and with Anatoly, it appears to hit him all at once like a brick. To put a little more simply, I don't think Anatoly would have been able to handle being our cooking companion. Physically, maybe, but emotionally, psychologically. Right before Anatoly is forced to leave the cabin, we're allowed one last interaction with him to max out our bond. Fail in this, and you'll be presented with two choices. Confess that you know what's going on in the basement, or say no. No matter which option you choose of these two, Anatoly will still tell you to get away from him, which pretty much says everything. He knows what happened to Mariah. He knows what the meat was and where it came from. He knows we're responsible, and he knows that when he leaves the cabin, her fate will eventually become his. Love him as I might, all of these factors do play in him not being the most ideal companion for us. And by the way, our confrontation with him in the basement it ripped out my heart. I'll admit, that hurt. Okay then, what about Gregory? Throughout the entire game, he pretty much eats whatever is put in front of him that can be remotely considered edible. From vegetable stew, to cabbage rolls, to homemade jam spread on stale bread, to pieces of moldy bread, all the way up until we eat Mariah and Anatoly, and even his own severed limbs. And yet, he doesn't lose himself to the hunger like Anatoly did, and he doesn't develop an intense craving for human flesh like Karin did. Throughout the game, all the way up until he dies from blood loss on the couch, Gregor manages to keep a good head on his shoulders. Except for that one time, he stays true to himself. That could be the reason why the Chompettes wanted us to protect him from Karin. Heck, it could be why we see Karin's actions as going too far with him. He ate his fair share, he helped out as much as he could, he didn't ask too many questions, and overall was just generally a good guy. I personally think that he would have become our cooking companion. It would have been like the ultimate good ending. He shows that he knows how to fish, and we have so many books on survivalism that devouring humans might not have even needed to be an option anymore. So long as we remained fed, we'd be all right. The long and short of it, the reason why Gregor never wound up being our cooking companion was because of Karin. Because her hunger reached further than ours. So where does all this leave us with Karin? Well, despite the fact that she's a total Karen, and I really wanted to throw her out of the cabin at first, she's not exactly stupid, nor does she limit herself in any way. Yeah, she complains when all we're down to is a few slices of moldy bread, and she does question where our mystery meat came from after Mariah leaves the cabin, but she still eats it. When no one was able to come to an agreement as to who should leave the cabin first, like us, she doesn't put herself out there until we resort to drawing sticks. And even then, it still works out in her favor. When it came to Anatoly, she wasn't like, "Oh, it's bad out there, and if he loses his glasses, he won't be able to see anything," like she was on the previous day with Mariah. On top of that, we know she's been reading the books that we keep on the bookshelf, which could be considered a collection of books that instruct the reader on how to survive out in the wilderness, if our books on necropsy and crafting are anything to go by. Karin even states that she bookmarked pages in the necropsy book, meaning she had every intention of using that knowledge and developing those skills. This game shows us that she's able to adapt to whatever situation she's confronted with, which is probably why she survives as long as she did trapped in the basement when we finally got tired of her bullshit, and just in general ended up being the last one that we were stuck with. Karin knows how to play the long game and learns and adapts as she goes. In that regard, she is on par with our own character, albeit a lot more ruthless, which could explain why the Chompettes were concerned about her taking over the cabin if we lost the final battle with her down in the basement. If our character didn't see her as an ideal cooking companion, and we don't max out our bond with her, Karin then becomes and is seen as a rival. A threat that needs to be taken care of. So there you have it. Despite the fact that I find the other characters much more likable, Karin winds out coming out on top as the most ideal cooking companion over the others. That's why the game takes the path that it does, and why we're unable to eliminate Karin off of the island, and end the story married to somebody else. Anyway, that'll be all for this video, you guys. Thank you for watching. I honestly don't really have any other theories about this game beyond this one, and honestly, game theory pretty much broke down everything else there is to break down about this game. But if there's anything that you think I missed, leave it in the comment section below. My name is BlueRaven666, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye-bye!